About 2 years ago, I breathed new life into my long dead channel by making my first ever God of War theory. And I have gotten many comments asking me how I got introduced to the series or what made me like God of War so much. And I always tried to ignore those comments because I wanted to make a dedicated video about that with my own voice. And today, on my 21st birthday, I decided it was time to finally talk about my love and hate relationship with God of War. It all starts back in 2010. I was a 5-year-old kid who absolutely loved watching Ben 10. Wait, what the fuck, Ben 10? Wasn't this video about God of War? Where did Ben 10 come from? Shh, calm down. I basically loved Ben 10 a lot, and I was watching that shit whenever it came on. And one day my long distance aunt came to visit my mother with a friend, and her friend brought her son with her. And the son had a weird little device in his hand. While the adults were in the other room discussing dresses, me and the boy were in the living room where I was watching Ben 10 as usual. That boy had a smug look on his face when I told him I liked Ben 10 a lot. He pulled out the little device that he had, which was a PSP, and he showed me a Ben 10 game he had on it. And I was losing my mind when I saw that Ben 10 game. But then that lady and her son went away and I never saw him again. But a few months later my aunt came back and she had a little gift for me. A freshly sealed PlayStation Portable with a memory card full of random games. There were probably around 20 games on that thing. The moment I turned it on, I saw the same Ben 10 game that the boy had, and I booted it up instantly. And for 2 weeks straight, if my PSP was to turn on, I was skipping past every other game and going straight for that Ben 10 game. My aunt noticed that I was only playing the Ben 10 game, so she asked me to try some other games as well. And since she brought me the PSP, I let her choose what game I was gonna play. She had no knowledge of games, so she randomly chose, and it was that random choice of hers that changed the entire fucking course of my life. She chose the game that had a muscular bald man covered in blood. God of War Chains of Olympus. The game turned on, but I wasn't feeling it. But the moment I got control of the Ghost of Sparta, I was lost into the game. I was having the time of my life. I was laughing crazy while killing the Persians, and then I looked up at my aunt to thank her only to see her shocked as she saw her nephew was tearing people apart and blood splattering everywhere and was laughing while doing that. Since I couldn't read and didn't know what the name of the game was, I started calling it God of War. And after that, I never played that Ben 10 game again. The game was indeed too difficult for a 5-year-old, but I didn't care as long as the blades were swinging, and I remember I always had trouble with the circle QTE, so I always had my father help me with that. And by helping me, my father also got addicted to the game. I would run home from school dying to play God of War, only to find out my father took the PSP to his office. Although I played it so much, I could never beat it. And now you guys might be thinking I got stuck on some hard boss or an enemy gauntlet, and I was 5 years old, so of course God of War would be too hard. Wanna know what I was stuck on? This fucking jump. For some reason, I could never make that jump, so whenever I reached that area, I would just restart the game. Even though I never made that jump, I was still playing and enjoying the game. But I never understood the story because I didn't speak English. And you guys are gonna laugh at me now. I thought this lady kidnapped Kratos' daughter, and I had to find her and get my daughter back. And one day I was playing around with the settings and I accidentally formatted the PSP. So now my PSP was just a piece of plastic that could do nothing. Until my father told his little brother that I formatted my PSP. So my uncle took my PSP and he installed some games on it himself. And when I came home to play the only disc game I had, I was surprised to see so many new games. But the bigger library of the games didn't matter to me. What mattered to me was this logo. And the logo was there, but it was different. I turned it on immediately and it was God of War Ghost of Sparta. The same chains, the same blood, the same shining bald head, but a completely new adventure. Ghost of Sparta was a game like no other. The game was so good, I even beat it as not just my first God of War game beaten, but also as my first ever game fully beaten. What I got from the story was Kratos' brother got kidnapped as a kid, and Kratos went on a journey to save him. But his brother didn't recognize him and started attacking him, until he later somehow recognized Kratos. And also I thought this lady and Thanatos were related somehow, and that Thanatos was her husband, so I just kept replaying God of War Ghost of Sparta. But I still couldn't understand English, so I tried to change the settings, and I ended up formatting my PSP again. So my uncle took me to a place to get games installed on my PSP, and before we even opened the door, I heard a familiar voice. And inside the shop, there were 6 gigantic ass TVs. 2 were playing WWE SmackDown, and the other 4 all were playing God of War 2. So my uncle handed the PSP to the shop guy, and he told me to tell him what games I wanted. And after I told him the games I wanted, my uncle handed me a controller while we were waiting and I got to play God of War 2 for the first time. At that moment I was completely fine if it took 5 days for the games to install on my PSP. But sadly it only took an hour and I had to leave just as I made it to the Pegasus section. I started begging to the shop guy to install this God of War into my PSP and he said he already did. And I was even more happier than a clean pet dog near dirty water. I couldn't wait to go home and play God of War 2 on my PSP. I got home and turned on my PSP ready to play God of War 2 just to see nothing. But hey, at least I had God of War Chains of Olympus and Ghost of Sparta, right? Right? Well, just a few weeks later on a wedding, I somehow lost my PSP. So, since I lost my PSP, my uncle had a spare Xbox 360, so he gave it to me. And 2 gigantic bags full of games. I immediately looked through every bag to see if there was God of War 2 or any other God of War game. And there was nothing. There were 2 Ben 10 games, but I don't give a fuck about Ben 10 anymore. I wanted God of War. So I told my uncle to bring me God of War and he said he will look into it. Both of us didn't know that God of War wasn't on Xbox, so I played on the 360 for a solid 3 months and 6 days until it got the red ring of death. So my uncle took the Xbox 360 back, but then I got another PSP, so I was okay with that. But this time I only had a copy of Loco Roco and nothing else. And not long after, my PSP was stored up into the storeroom and completely forgotten. And a while later, my parents also got divorced. So now comes 2015. My mother didn't want to spend money on my school supplies, so she sent me to my father so that he can spend money on that. And while I was staying with my father, I was allowed to go to the game store and play God of War 2 there. So I didn't care about the selfish adults. I was enjoying my time playing God of War 2. Every Saturday and Sundays, I would go to the game store and just play God of War 2 there the entire day. And I was able to make a lot of progress in God of War 2, but some idiot decided to save over my file. Whoever you are, I still hate you, buddy. And he also had the guy install games into my PSP and I was finally able to make that jump and finally beat Chains of Olympus as well. So from how far I had made it into God of War 2, what I understood from the story was Kratos' city got attacked by an old man and he went down to protect his city and died in the process. And then he set out on his journey to take revenge on his city and kill the old man. After my father got me the school supplies, my mother called me back and she didn't let me speak to my father until the next year when I needed school supplies again. Then comes 2017. Internet in India had become dirt cheap and I was finally able to watch YouTube videos. And one day while watching YouTube, I came across a video of God of War 1. It was the same blades, the same health bars, the same gameplay and the same angry bald man. I wanted to play it, but it was only on PS2 and PS3. I watched a ton of videos on how to download it on my phone, but all of the videos were fake and I don't even know how much bloatware I downloaded on my phone because of that. I had decided that next time I go to the game store, I am going to play God of War 1. But the school was about to start again. So my mother sent me back to my father for school supplies and I got to go to the game store again. The shop guy recognized me and he knew exactly what I was gonna play. So he handed me a controller which was very similar to the PS2, but there was no cable, and on the screen came my interface similar to the PSP. And I got to play the black sheep of the franchise, God of War Ascension. But the controls were too difficult for me, so I told him to give me another God of War. What I understood from the story of Ascension was that this time Kratos himself is kidnapped. Yes, I still thought the entire plot of God of War was just kidnapping. So he closed God of War Ascension and he opened Zesti's first love, God of War 3. The same old controls, new graphics and an even shinier bald head. I absolutely loved God of War 3, and in terms of story, no idea what the fuck is going on, but I'm here for it. The blades must keep swinging. I remember I made it all the way to Horace Gardens, but then someone again saved over my file. Whoever or wherever you are, buddy, stay there, don't let me find you, it won't end well. And after a while my PSP's age got to it and it stopped working. And my father thought, instead of sending me to the game store every day, why not just buy me a console? And so we purchased a PS2. Why not a PS3, you may ask? Well, a PS3 was more expensive and we didn't even know that the PS3 could play all of the God of War games. And after getting the PS2, I was excited to play God of War 2, but I didn't know that you needed a memory card to save the game, and the shopkeeper forgot to give me a memory card. And then he closed his shop for 2 weeks to go on a vacation. After I got the memory card, I beat God of War 2 and then I beat God of War 1 as well. In case you haven't noticed already, I love God of War a lot and I was a big fan, so much so that I even beat up a 7-year-old for calling Kratos stupid. After that, I don't know what happened to my PS2 or where it went, it just vanished out of thin air. But anyways, then comes April 20, 2018. I woke up to a notification on my phone and it was from a YouTuber I used to watch back then, and he was playing God of War. So since it was God of War, I immediately clicked on it as soon as I saw it. That of boy, this is my honest reaction when I saw God of War 4 for the first time. What the hell? I absolutely hated God of War 4. It looked nothing like the God of War that I grew up with. It took me a long time to finally accept God of War 4 as an actual God of War game. I still hated it, but I kinda warmed up to it, even though I never got to play it. Now comes 2022. I discovered Captain Cuba and Celti's channel, and I was excited for God of War Ragnarok. Everyone was, but I still had no way of playing the Norse game, so I was just waiting for it to release so that I can watch others play it. And I would love to express my hatred towards God of War Ragnarok, but that needs to be a video of its own, because what the fuck is this Disney R character doing in God of War? All I'm gonna say is God of War Ragnarok reignited my hatred towards the Norse games. Anyways, now let's jump to 2023. I had saved up some money and I was able to finally buy myself a PS3. Why not a PS4 or PS5, you might ask? Because I only had around $60. I could only afford a PS3. So I finally got a PS3 and I was finally able to beat God of War 3. But for some reason, it wasn't as enjoyable as I thought. Because for years I watched others play God of War 3 and I knew everything that was gonna happen in the game. There was no surprise for me. I knew how to solve every puzzle and how to beat every encounter. So that's why I wasn't able to enjoy God of War 3 as much. And a while later, I downloaded God of War Ascension into my PS3 as well. And I actually never watched a single God of War Ascension video on YouTube. So in 2023, I got to play God of War Ascension for the very first time and I enjoyed it. And God of War Ascension just made me hate the Norse games even more, because I started to love God of War Ascension's combat. Because Ascension was just like the God of War that I grew up with. Since I grew up with God of War, it always has a special place in my heart. But with the current state of God of War games, I don't know if I can keep calling myself a God of War fan. That's why another game has moved in right next to God of War, which is Hollow Knight. I am not switching completely over to Hollow Knight, but I will do both Hollow Knight and God of War content from now on. And with that, this video comes to an end, and I hope that I someday get to play the Norse games as well. Even though I hate them, I just want to see if my hate is justified or not. And I am also dying to play God of War Sons of Sparta and the remakes, but I don't have a PS5 still and my PC isn't powerful enough, so we'll have to wait and see. This was Mornville's birthday special video and I'll see you in the next one.